Hey, this is Dan here, again with another installment of us interviewing prominent data science figures across the world, talking about the intersection of data science and business and how it relates to organizations. Today, I'm joined by Josh Sutton. Josh, it's a pleasure to have you. Could you give us a little bit of your background and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me on today, Dan. So Josh Sutton, I'm the CEO of Agorai. We are a company that is focused on helping companies to monetize their data, either via direct sale of those assets, figuring out how to generate more value, or more typically actually treating them as an asset that can be financed the way you would look at any other asset that you own, whether it's a building or a plane or any other physical asset.
The approach there is just fantastic. You know, forever we've been talking about how data is the new oil, but you are the first organization that I've ever heard of that is actually saying your data has real value to it.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting evolution. So by way of my background, I spent the first 20 years of my career working across capital markets and data in the consulting side. And it was always somewhat frustrated about how people talked about how valuable data was, but they never made that final leap toward treating it as a real asset. So we've been kind of laying the foundation to do that. And then this past year with COVID has really accelerated that as companies across the globe are looking at what assets do they actually own that aren't currently leveraged. And data is almost in every case one of the most valuable assets of a company, and we're just helping them extract that value out in real financial terms right now.
So cool. And it's one of those things where it's like, it's so obvious, right? And it's amazing that it hadn't been done before. So I can imagine the benefit to organizations that it's had. You have an extensive background in the space. Can you talk a little bit about some of your previous roles?
Yeah, sure. So prior to launching Agorai 3 years ago, I spent the first 20 years of my career on the consulting side at Sapient and then subsequently Publicis after we sold our company to them at the end of 2014. While I was there, I launched our capital markets business, grew that along with the rest of the team up to a multi-$100 million annual business, stepped out of that day job into something that was a bit more fascinating, actually, which was leading all of our company's efforts around data and artificial intelligence. So I spent a number of years doing that, and then took the leap and launched Agorai, and it's been an amazing journey every step of the way.
That's incredible. So I think I'm going to have some great questions for you, given the work that you had done with Sapient and your background in the data science aspects of that. So I guess I'll kick off with my first question that I like to ask everybody is, especially given your background, what is one thing that you wish that executives knew about data science today?
If I could wave a magic wand and make them understand one thing, it's that you can make incrementally better decisions, but it's really about the data collection. So if you think about it as a bad analogy, but an analogy nonetheless, it's kind of like a chef. And you can only cook a meal that's as good as the ingredients that you have. So as you think about building a business, the ability to capture data every step of the way is incredibly valuable. You might not wind up using it, but as an executive, understanding that the more ingredients you can give a chef, the better meal you're going to have at the end of the day is something that is instrumental, because it's that upfront foundation setting that sets the table for what you can do with data science. So it's that understanding of the importance of capturing everything, even if you don't know quite what you're going to use it for yet, is the one thing I wish executives took to heart more often than I see them do that today.
That analogy really holds up in so many ways, because you could play that out to being like fresher ingredients also tend to matter more, right? Stale
Absolutely.
ingredients matter, they're not going to be as valuable. And
Sure.
same is true with data.
Mhm. That's exactly right. And it really is just, it's understanding the importance of providing the raw tools. So that's from an executive point of view. And then obviously there's the realization that data science, like any other science, is a process. It's not a one, press an easy button and all of a sudden you have an answer. There's a lot of work and you don't always get quite what you want. But the more that you put in and the more that you line up, the better likelihood you have of an outcome that's in line with what you want.
Yeah, I'd love to come back to that a little later in the discussion as well. One around the idea of the work that needs, the iterations that need to go into data science, as well as thinking about, one of the hardest parts, which we can come back to, is around data infrastructure, and what that means for business executives as they think about making those decisions. Before that, though, I'd love to turn that around. Because I don't want to be completely unfair to the business side. What do you think it is that executives wish that data scientists today knew about business?
I think the biggest thing, and this really going back to kind of driving principles, is executives wish data scientists could focus more on the how rather than the why. It's really easy for data scientists to get caught up in figuring out why something happens. But from a business point of view, if you're running a multi-billion-dollar P&L or you're running a whatever part of the business you're responsible for, what you care about as an executive is typically, how do I get better results? How do I drive better conversion? How do I drive higher profit margins? It's the ability to answer that how that they're seeking, but data scientists are, as a generalization, not always, but oftentimes very focused on why something happens. And
Right.
there is an overlap of those two in a Venn diagram, but there's also a lot that's not overlapping. And that's where your disconnects start to happen.
Right, right. Being able to explain because the business executive is looking for something that's repeatable, and the understanding of the how that something happens allows them to make decisions in that given instance. Is that fair to say, or is there a different way that you might be thinking
Yes,
about
I mean, just a very, very simplistic example. So if you're running a retail business online, and as a data scientist, you might be fascinated with understanding 80 different things about the consumer, what makes them tick, what drives them. But as the executive, what I really want to understand is, how can I actually drive a 3% increase in conversion? Because that's going to allow me to hire 20 more people for the data science team and put up better margins for the company. And those two things are where people don't always see eye to eye. And a lot of it's just because of communication gaps. So it really comes down to an ability to clearly communicate between the data science team and the executive team as to what you're really trying to achieve and what the desired outcome is from any type of project or initiative.
Yeah. We often see in the data science world, there's that classic Venn diagram of what a data scientist is, where it's one circle is, statistics, the other's computer science, and the other's business. And it wouldn't be fair to data scientists to say that the business category has been somewhat neglected, although because they definitely focus on business problems. To your point, I think that what that needs to be reframed as is, you need to understand as a data scientist how that data is going to be used to make decisions and how it's going to be consumed. And if it's not going to be, if it's that data can't make decisions, then there's a good chance that it's not going to provide any real business value at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And I mean, at the end of the day, I'm kind of a, grizzled capital markets bias type of person. I spent a lot of my life working in financial markets. And while there's cycles where people get excited by customer acquisition and learning different things, and people say profit doesn't matter, it always comes back to profit matters, and how you generate revenue matters, and being able to grow the economics of a company are what drive consistent growth over the long term. And that's what I think people get away from sometimes, that you can pull them back to, goes a long way.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. So along those lines, I kind of want to go back to something that we were talking about, and that's the idea of kind of iteration. I think that there's this notion that the implementation of, I'm going to use the term AI, is binary. It either works or it doesn't work. And you either have AI or you don't have AI, as opposed to the idea that you can iterate, for example, on your analogy on creating a better meal. It might be an okay meal. It still allowed you got sustenance from it, but it might not have been the most tasty or nutritious. And you can iterate on that as you collect better data, as it performs better. Have you encountered that type of thinking? And is there a way, to kind of counter that approach that would be a good way to kind of frame that conversation?
I think it is incredibly important for every business out there that wants to continue to become more data driven, leverage AI, and think about that, to understand that it is more so than ever kind of crawl, walk, run. Going back to the food analogy, you might say, I want a great 3 Michelin star meal, but you need to start with the basics. Boil some water, cook some pasta, do the things that are achievable quickly so you can figure out what works and what doesn't. And that incremental step is a way that I've seen companies really succeed with becoming data-driven and AI-first organizations. Having the mentality that data matters, I'm going to collect everything I can, but I'm going to try to generate results in a very quick, rapid, piece-by-piece methodology that doesn't try to boil the ocean, but just tackles really simple things. And they might not be sexy things, but they're things that you can do pretty easily. So
Yeah.
just to kind of go on one more thing on that, if I can. People think about AI as this big overarching thing, and I think Hollywood is to blame for a big part of that. Most AI in business is really, really boring stuff, but really valuable if done right. And shifting that mindset that it's not about this, coming up with answers to things that you couldn't on your own, but just doing basic automation of things that can be done a bit more accurately and a bit faster, that's going to drive real improvements in your business.
Absolutely. There's nothing sexy about extracting text out of standardized forms automatically, right? OCR. But I mean, the benefits of that from a cost savings and efficiency standpoint that we've seen companies like JP Morgan, even, something saved like 360,000 man hours of entry, manual entry, I should say. The cost savings and efficiencies are enormous.
Well, and that actually plays out in the ability to deliver real value. So think about offering loans. If you can automate that OCR, extract things out, and I can deliver the same loan that you can, and we're both banks, but I can do it in 3 days and you take 3 weeks, that's a fundamentally different value proposition to the customer. And not just beyond the fact that my costs are lower because I don't have all of that human capital, I'm creating a better product for my customers.
Yeah. The chances of you winning that business increase substantially given that better experience in shorter time. That's great.
Absolutely.
So since we need those good ingredients, and this is often talked about as one of the hardest parts about utilizing AI across an organization, is there a way that the business side of the organization should start to interface with the more technical sides and be thinking about data infrastructure and data collection?
There is, and I like to think about this from kind of a long-term strategic planning. So if you can get whether it's in a workshop setting or some type of planning session, data scientists and business leaders together to map out, what do we want to be able to do in 5 years? What do we want to be able to do in 2 years? What do we want to be able to do at the end of this year? What does that mean for the different underlying data elements that we're going to need to do that right? And an easy way to think about this and get everybody on the same page is forget about technology, forget about what you can automate. If you had an unlimited army of people, what data would they need to do this in the best possible way? That's what you should gear toward collecting. And then you can actually start to automate all of that, which is great. But removing some of the mystery about how technology works goes a long way toward figuring out what do we need to actually collect every step of the way, and what do we maybe even need to buy externally, or what do we need to augment our data with to be able to deliver on these business strategies that we want to achieve in the coming years.
Yeah, that's a very helpful way to present that. If we had unlimited manpower, what would we want to collect?
Right.
And that's a great way to think, as you said, kind of demystify just what that process looks like, and then figure out from a technical standpoint just what that would take.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's really all AI is, in my mind, is a force multiplier. It doesn't change what you can do. It just makes you able to do it at exponentially higher efficiency rates.
Yeah. With that, going to the data science side and how they're communicating with executives, if you're talking to an entry level data scientist that's entering the marketplace, what's the kind of thing that you might say to them that might help them better communicate, or types of questions that they should be asking of the business side to help them better understand those goals and really hit on that business circle of that Venn diagram in the right way?
It's a simple question, but one that not nearly enough people ask, which is, what does success look like? If we are sitting here a week from now, a month from now, or a year from now, what is something that you want to be able to say that you've done, that we've accomplished, that makes us happy that we went on this journey together? So as you, as a data scientist entering your career, the thing that's going to really differentiate you and make you incredibly more valuable than otherwise you would be to an organization is the ability to prioritize what are the results that you're trying to achieve and understand that from a business point of view. Because if you can be the one that asks the question in a way that people can relate to and do that internal translation to what that means to you then from a data science point of view, that's a huge value add to an organization.
It's awesome. This has been a great conversation and a really, really good insight. I think that there are some soundbite nuggets in here that anyone can pull out of that. I wanted to quickly ask, is there anything exciting that you can share about Agorai and what's next for Agorai in the space?
I mean, what I'm incredibly excited about with what we're doing at Agorai is really turning data into an asset class. So everything we've talked about right now about how does data make an organization more valuable, what we're doing by working with companies and turning that into an asset that's financed is actually a multiplier effect to the value of a company. Because if I'm using data to create revenue for a company and I'm valuing that data at 5 or 10x whatever the annual revenue I'm generating it for, that's now something that I can look at as an asset of the company. And I, as a CEO or a business executive, am able to think very differently about investments in my data infrastructure, my data science teams, because it's not just an end to a means. It's actually an asset of the company from a financial point of view. So what I'm really excited about is kind of the capital markets wonky side of me is incredibly excited about effectively a new asset class. But from a business effectiveness point of view, giving executives and giving companies the ammunition to invest more in data science and more in data infrastructure, I think is going to continue to be an accelerant to efficiency in businesses of all kinds. And I'm really excited to see where that takes us to.
If you weren't yet convinced in data capture, as an organization. I believe that you've now given them zero excuse because there's a direct there's no, you've taken the guesswork out of it. There's a direct correlation between you capture this data and you're going to be able to turn this into an asset, as opposed to we have this data and we might have to run some experiments and iterate on it. What's amazing is that still adds a lot of value, right? The data science.
But there's nothing that says value like a few $100 million getting deposited in the bank.
I think I'm going to leave it there because I there's no way to top that. Exactly. Awesome, Josh. I super appreciate your time today, and thanks for doing the interview with us. Can't wait to follow you guys.
Great. Looking forward. Thanks a lot.
You bet.
Take care.